Could we see a huge NHL draft day trade between the Vancouver Canucks and New Jersey Devils? Is Jack Campbell done in Toronto? Plus, we have the latest updates on the NHL coaching carousel. Another award has been handed out, and we're going to recap the Avs-Oilers game from last night. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to take a look at today. First up, let's take a look at recapping last night's NHL action in the third round of the conference finals of the Western Conference last night, with the Colorado Avalanche defeating the Oilers 4-0. Obviously, the Oilers didn't have a great night. They were shut out. They were neutralized, and the Avalanche took advantage. The first period wasn't too bad. Ended up scoreless, but the Avalanche ended up exploding for 3 quick goals in the second period, and then, of course, added a fourth one after. They kind of scored in bunches there. I think they had 2 goals in 15 seconds and then 3 goals, and geez, it was like a minute, something, 2 minutes. It was very, very quick. I don't remember the exact time. Kadri was involved in all of them, and it was just a fast and furious pace there for a little bit, and they secured themselves the victory. You could see Cale Makar played a lot against Connor McDavid again, made some good defensive plays, and certainly neutralized his efforts. Nathan MacKinnon did add a goal later. So far, McKinnon versus McDavid and Makar obviously been on the ice a lot against McDavid and company. So far, they have the upper hand. That's 2-0 now for the Avs. And unfortunately, something Oilers fans don't want to hear, but at this stage of the playoffs, between the conference finals and the cup finals, when teams get down 2-0 in the series, they rarely come back. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, and I don't think the Oilers are completely done or out of this series, but it's super, super difficult at this stage of the playoffs to make another big comeback. I do expect and hope that the Oilers win at least a game or two here and make a series of this. I think they're capable of it for sure. I think they'll bounce back and play better at home. But it's just the historical trends certainly do not favor them. So we'll see how things go. But I'm hoping myself, just strictly from an entertainment perspective, I'm somebody who has no skin in the game here, to have this series go 6 or 7 just to keep up, because it's so much fun to watch. Great action again last night. Of course, tonight we have Game 2 between the Lightning and the New York Rangers. We'll see if the Lightning can bounce back, or can the Rangers keep up their stellar play and take a 2-0 series lead as well. I do expect the Lightning, who in almost 3 playoff years now have not lost back-to-back games. It's the Vasilevsky special that he always bounces back and plays an exceptional game after. So we'll see if that trend can continue tonight. Now, of course, in last night's game 2 with the Oilers and Avs, there was a fine handed out against Oilers forward Zach Kassian. He was fined $2,500 for unsportsmanlike conduct. Now, we had another award handed out last night, and this is going to continue for a little while. The Jack Adams Award for Coach of the Year was awarded to Calgary Flames bench boss Daryl Sutter, and he won by a large margin. Obviously, Andrew Brunette was in second place from the Florida Panthers, and Gerard Gallant of the Rangers was in third place. So certainly the voters, which in this one's voted on by broadcasters, obviously heavily weighted here for Sutter to win, which is certainly, I have no issue with Daryl Sutter winning this award. I think the Flames had an excellent year, and he was a big part of it. So being recognized, no problems whatsoever. But one thing, when you look at, and I'll try to show it here on the screen if I can locate the image of it again, but there was an image I saw on Twitter showing the full breakdown of how all the votes went. And it amazes me how many really good coaches don't seem to get any love for this award year after year after year. Looking at some of the top teams, and it's not just a one-year thing. Like, look at John Cooper in Tampa. They've won back-to-back Stanley Cups. They're in the Final Four here yet again. And he's never won this award, never even comes close. Sheldon Keefe had a record-setting season for the Maple Leafs. Hardly any votes at all. Jared Bednar in Colorado, again, hardly any love. Craig Berube in the Blues went to the second round. I know it's a regular season award, but still, they had really good seasons. And it's not shocking that a guy like Sutter would win, or even that a guy like Gallant would be in the top 3. But it's just that it's such a gap. Really good coaches having really good years and are not getting picked by anybody. So it's I find it mind-blowing myself that that's the way things tend to work. For some reason, a number of years back, it always seems to be that the award is picked by the teams who improve the most. If you've had a good team and you've been good for a period of time, you won't get it. For example, where the Rangers were lower in the standings for a long time going through their rebuild, now that Gallant's been nominated this year. If they stay good for a while, which you expect them to be, he probably won't get nominated again for an extended time. And it's just depending on who else improves next year. It's almost like the most improved award, which I don't really tend to agree with. I mean, there's lots of great coaches. And like I said, I don't have any issues with the top three being recognized. I think they all did fantastic jobs. It just amazes me that there's such a gap in that these guys that have really good teams don't seem to get any credit for it. It's no different than the GM of the Year award. A guy like Julien Brisebois clearly knows what he's doing, back-to-back champions, and yet he can't win that award. It went to Lou Lamoriello both times, and I think Lou did a good job on those years. I think it'd be somebody different this year, but still, just mind-blowing how the voting tends to go. Now, staying with the coaching topic here for a little bit, obviously we get some updates on a few teams and coaches. Elliot Friedman's reporting in his latest 32 Thoughts column, that Barry Trotz and Winnipeg, that there's very much a major interest from the Jets, to the point that they have not had any kind of meaningful discussions or really any structured interviews with other candidates. It seems like they interviewed Barry, offered him whatever it is they offered him. It's believed that there's an offer there, and that they're waiting for his decision before they move forward with anybody else. So they don't even want to talk to other coaches. So you know that they're extremely serious. There's also some to believe that as many as 4 or 5 teams have reached out and talked to Trotz, but there's some that think it's down to 2, with the Jets being one of them and the Golden Knights being the other. Emily Kaplan of ESPN had reported that she had sources indicating that there could already be a deal in place or being worked on or close between Trotz and Vegas. Obviously, it's clear from what Friedman's been saying that he's right and that Barry Trotz intends to take his time. And there's really no clear-cut answer on when he's going to make a decision. And it seems like it's one of those cases where the market is kind of held up waiting for this domino to fall before teams make other decisions and really announce anybody else. Because you'd think by now you'd see of all the teams that have vacancies that somebody would have hired a coach. And the only one that's made an announcement is Montreal, but they really weren't interviewing any candidates because they already had their interim coach. It was just a matter of deciding, A, do we want him back? The answer they knew was yes before the end of the season. And B, they just had to negotiate the contract, which took a little bit of time. That's all we've got so far for news on that front. So very interesting. So we'll see when the Trotz domino falls. We'll probably see a lot of other names kind of fall in line here. Pierre LeBrun's also reporting that former NHL coach Guy Boucher, of course, who coached the Ottawa Senators and the Tampa Bay Lightning, both made conference finals appearance in his tenure with each team, has resurfaced looking for more NHL employment as well, and could be possibly in the mix for some of these openings. Obviously, both times in the NHL previously, he lasted 3 seasons at each job. The first season was a conference finals appearance, followed by the teams regressing and missing the playoffs, and then led to him getting the axe. So obviously, one person he's worked with before that has an opening right now is Steve Yzerman in Detroit. I don't know if there'd be any interest to possibly reunite again. It's been rumored that Yzerman's talked to multiple candidates, and it's not unusual for Yzerman to even go off the board. I know there's many that feel that Yzerman probably will go with a candidate that you might not expect, but it's more likely, at least I've heard it from enough places, that Yzerman and the Red Wings are probably going to hire a coach for like an up-and-coming coach, not like a recycled veteran coach. Probably looking at a really good American Hockey League coach or a really good assistant coach at the NHL that's ready for a promotion. That seems like a likely scenario, possibly even a guy like Derek Lalonde, who's, of course, on John Cooper's staff in Tampa. So if he wants to talk to him and consider him for this job, he can't speak to him until the Lightning season's over. So that could be a little while yet. And, of course, they would be familiar with each other as well, because Yzerman was the one who brought Cooper up to the Lightning when he was a GM there before he moved on to the Detroit Red Wings. So some interesting information there on the coaching carousel. And of course, we got some information today as well on the new 32 Thoughts podcast that I found really interesting, which leads us to think, which we've already kind of talked about, but it just gives us more fuel for the fire here to think that maybe there's more to it. But could we see a significant draft day trade between the Canucks and possibly the Devils? Now, Jeff Merrick is currently in Buffalo for the NHL Draft Combine, where he was at and when they recorded the 32 Thoughts podcast last night with Elliot Friedman. So they kicked off the podcast that was released today, recorded last night, by Jeff telling some stories from his first day at the Combine. He's had a chance to talk to a lot of scouts, lots of NHL executives, and of course, lots of prospects, which we know, if you know Jeff Merrick, he's really into that stuff, and Sportsnet has a whole crew down there. They interviewed, I believe it was 12 prospects yesterday, and the one prospect that seemed to be the most interesting was Jerard Fagerberg, who was expected to go number 2 overall. If you've seen any of my previous mock drafts, that's where I've had him. Some people think there's a chance he could go number 1. He's a big body, about 6'3", 215, 220 pounds. Had a heck of a year, played in the World Juniors, the Olympics, the World Championships, and he's just done phenomenal. And the thing that was most interesting about his conversation with this prospect was the prospect revealed that during his team interviews that he was asked by a few if he could play center, because he's projected right now, and he's, his stats in the draft show him as being a winger, which is what he's been most recently. And he said, yes, he's played center before. And it's possible he could play center at the NHL level. He's, obviously would have to try that and see how it goes. But he said when Merrick asked him which teams asked you that, he said, well, there was a few, I'm trying to remember them, but he said the ones that come to mind are New Jersey and Vancouver. And when he's telling this to Elliot Friedman, he's like, okay, well, New Jersey makes sense picking number 2, but he's like, wait a second, hold on here. Vancouver is picking number 15 overall. Why would they want to interview a prospect who expected to go number 2 and ask these kind of questions? Like, clearly they're not going to expect him to fall down to be available where they're picking, right? So clearly that sets off the signals here that the Canucks must be considering a trade. Now, we've already know that based on Tom Fitzgerald in New Jersey, that number 2 pick is possibly available for trade. He's made it known that they would consider it for the right deal, of course. And it certainly makes you think that Vancouver is considering moving up. But at the same time, you have to realize that some of these teams that are lower than the top few spots, like if you're anywhere from 7, 8, 9, 10 down to like 14, 15, if you're thinking that you never know what's going to come available for trades, right? That you got to be prepared, that what you're going to do if something materializes. So certainly good on Vancouver for doing their homework and being prepared in that sense, and that could be all it is to it. But based on rumors that have been circulating, there is some, I think, that makes sense that maybe these two teams have had conversations. Obviously New Jersey, as much as they might like this player, they don't really need yet another center. They've already got Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Dawson Mercer. They got 3 really young, really qualified center icemen there. They'd probably prefer a winger. Not to say they would pass up on Slafkovsky, because to me, there's no guarantee he could be a center. He is more of a winger right now. So certainly it's a situation where obviously they would expect him to probably play wing. And if he has to play wing to fit with that team, so be it. Like, he'd be a great winger addition for that team. So I'm not convinced 100% here that New Jersey would trade this pick. You got to remember, there's trade rumors and trade talk around some of these high picks pretty much every year at the draft. There's always rumors and stories circulating about teams having conversations around it, because a lot of them, why not see what it's looked like? If you're lower in the draft, wouldn't you want to know what it's going to cost to get your hands on one of those top players, and vice versa? You might want to know, as much as I like this prospect, geez, if we can get 2 or 3 really valuable players that affect us and impact us now, we can win now, I'd rather do that, right? So there's conversations that happen all the time. They don't always go anywhere, which is, sometimes we hear about them in the rumor mill, and sometimes we don't. But it certainly makes you wonder about JT Miller, because if you look at the Canucks roster, what could they possibly be interested in for New Jersey in this pick? He's really the main piece there. Like, New Jersey's not going to trade this pick unless they can get a player with term. That is absolutely clear based on everything we've heard so far. Now, JT Miller doesn't come with term. JT Miller has 1 year left, but if they were to discuss a trade, they could allow Miller's agent to talk to the Devils and work out an extension. And that would probably be the only way that would even be considered. And I don't think it would be Miller for the number 2 pick straight up. There would have to be other assets involved, possibly on both sides. So, and I'm not necessarily convinced that would be the deal. I think there's other players in the NHL that are younger and could come with term as well that New Jersey might prefer. But for Vancouver, if they were have any chance of pulling this off, to me, that's probably the deal. It would have to be with like some other pieces around it. So time will tell, but certainly want to watch that as a potential draft trade. Now, as I mentioned as well, is Jack Campbell's time with the Maple Leafs coming to an end? There's been numerous reports, including updates in the latest 32 Thoughts blog, talking about negotiations between the Leafs and Campbell, and the fact that since the regular season came and went and the playoffs came and went, there's been no discussions at all, according to Friedman, and he confirmed this with Campbell's agent, that nothing since the end of the season here. Now, yes, there's still plenty of time, so it doesn't mean that it's completely a done deal that he's gone. But it's believed that the most recent offer, the last time they did have talks, was that the Leafs were, around 3 to 3.5 million, and Campbell's looking for around 5. That's a pretty big gap. It's believed that he and his agent are looking at comparable contracts for players like Linus Ullmark in Boston, Cal Peterson in LA, Elvis Merzlikins in Columbus, as the contracts that they're kind of using as a comparable here that he should be in line to get. And to be honest, those are very fair, I think. I don't see any reason why Campbell couldn't be in that 5 million range, maybe a little less, a little more, depending on the market and all that and whatever. It does make sense to me that would be a reasonable deal. Now, of course, it's also going to depend on how bad he wants to be a Maple Leaf, but considering that they've been done for a while now and they haven't had any discussions, you think that Kyle Dubas and the Leafs are not going to want to wait too late before they really know if they're moving on or not, because they're going to have to start working on the next plan for who's going to be our goaltender next year. It's sure as heck not going to be Peter Mrazek. And if they need to find another goaltender, they either need to go into free agency, which there's not a really deep amount of players they could talk to, or they need to figure out a potential trade. Now, the other option here, of course, is that they try to figure out a way to offer Campbell more money. If they're really that happy with him and really want to try to keep him, they might have no choice but to free up some cap space to make that happen. So, I mean, I'm not really convinced at this point that it's a case that they feel like Campbell is not worth more money than that. They just can't afford, based on today's roster, to be able to pay that. So, if they offer that and he takes it, great, they can keep him for a cheaper price. But if he insists on getting more money, then they're not going to have a choice but to try to find other ways to do it. So, to be honest, if Jack Campbell signs for more money in Toronto, or if they trade for another goalie who's possibly making more money, no matter how you shake it, they're probably going to need to find some cap space. So a guy like Alex Kerfoot or a Jake Muzzin or something like that might not have a choice but to be moved for the right price to free up some space. And if they do that, they could possibly counteroffer with Campbell and try to sign him. By no means is it a done deal confirmation that Campbell won't be back, but the fact that there's been no meaningful negotiations here so far, it certainly doesn't look good. But like I said before, when it comes to contract negotiations, anything can change with one phone call, and we'll see where things go. I think Campbell, to be honest, I don't think he'll have a hard time getting a $5 million offer on the open market. So if he really wants that price point, and to me, it's a time for him. He's got to think about himself and his family as well as being a Leaf. I know he enjoys his time there and probably wants to stay, but he's a late blooming goaltender, 30 years old. This is probably his last real good chance to cash in on a mid-range to long-term deal for $4 or $5 million a year. Like, he's got to be able to cash in here. It's probably his last chance at a solid payday, because that's the thing with these athletes. Everybody always complains about how much money they make, but you have to realize and understand that they have a really small window to be able to have big earning power, and you got to make as much as you can, because you might have to survive on that the rest of your life. Not everybody ends up with a big career post-hockey making big money, right? So you have to take advantage of it while you can, because you don't know how long it's going to be there. But we'll see what happens. But right now, things are not looking promising for Campbell to stay in Toronto. Let me know your thoughts on which way the Leafs go. Do they end up paying him that money and moving somebody else out, or do you see Campbell moving on and then finding themselves a new goalie for next year and beyond? If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.